Hello, this is this is Pastor Laura Cavendish, and I am sharing Lenten devotions with you during this season. And I spent some time doing a camera check this morning so I could be a little closer to you. And so we gather, and I do this live, and it all depends on whether you can tune in every day. I told people yesterday we're using Book of Faith Lenten Journey, Marks of the Christian by David L. Miller. If not, you'll find out everything here. This is kind of in the style of a podcast in that I just share what is written and it's a listening place. Another announcement is I know some of you chat during videos and some of you don't. It all depends on your skills and your abilities. It's important for you to know that this chat during this devotion is only open to subscribers. So if you are not a subscriber, subscribe to our channel, and that will become a reality for you that you can join in on the chat. Now, the chat has a little bit of time delay. So if you're not seeing yours, that can be an issue. So I know that's not a comfort thing for many of you, but I just want you to know it's out there. All right, let's get to our devotion for today. Today's devotion is about sacrifice, and we are focused on that passage from Romans 12. And we are focused on that first verse today. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. Now, this author, I notice, begins with a prayer of his own, and then he begins to write. And we gain insight from listening to him. I wake again into a world where you are loving presence. Lighting 3 small candles, I kneel and mumble my prayer. My words strain to touch what I feel and most need. May my posture be better prayer than words, a silent crying hunger to know you, loving and near. In kneeling, I give myself to you. Do what you will with this life, it's yours. And then I remember Dimce. The front curl of his wavy brown hair danced as he drew a mass of intersecting lines on a succession of paper napkins. And we sat in a cafe in Skopje, Macedonia on a sunny April day. Dimce was the business manager of an agency that dug wells in poor villages in his country. But this day he was diagramming how he managed a river of food and supplies from ports in Greece and Albania through Balkan mountain passes to refugee camps in Macedonia. 80,000 lives depended on the incomprehensible scribble on the back of a napkin. And Dimce never looked up. He extended his diagram from one rumpled napkin to the next, explaining all the while, but he never looked at me. He was totally surrendered to a life-giving task that had become a holy obsession. Holy indeed, for preserving and nurturing life is God's work. I think of him, my Lord, and so many others who taught me without having any idea that I would remember them years later. Dimce did not give you part of himself. He did not surrender some small pleasure to discipline himself or to identify with your sacrificial love as we do in Lent. He willingly gave himself to your life-giving labor of love for the world. A deep desire within his soul moved him, not some external compulsion or law. Tell me, from what life-giving spring does this desire flow, fresh and free? Oh, it is you, loving God. It is always you. Give me that desire. Awaken me each day to your mercies, that I may be as surrendered to your life-giving ways as was Dimce. Would to God that I would glow with such beauty. I hope that you have had a similar vision of someone so committed. Um, I still was so moved and always am by the response of I have a nephew serving in Puerto Rico as a pastor, and his spouse also is a leader in that community and in that region. And the two of them together responding to the earthquake and that they had, or the series of earthquakes years ago, and they just entered in with such passion and the freedom of knowing and that God was using them and just gave them freedom. That was a vision that made an aunt proud for sure. so and so just such a passion. All right. So those are examples given for us. I know some of you have found your passions um, and live them out. Live them out. I have another one that comes to mind, but they might be embarrassed for me to bring it up. So live in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. That's a passage you can work on today if you'd like to. Ephesians 5:2. Live in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. And here's a theological thought. I always like to know, I don't know if you do, but I always like to know who is giving us this. And this is from the author himself in his article, Where Beauty Lives, published in 2004 in The Lutheran, Where Beauty Lives. The Church of Christ is a fellowship of givenness, a communion of holy surrender to an inscrutable love that continuously gives itself to the ungrateful and undeserving, and that is to us. Only the beauty of surrendered lives will make a cynical world take notice. If the church fails to nurture such beauty, the world is right to ignore us. Wow. Nurturing surrendered lives is important work together. Now, that is something you can react to in your journal. Think about. Here are some questions that get us thinking. What do you do each morning or day to put yourself before God, centering your life and attention? That just is such a life-giving practice. And you are helping me make that easy during a stressful season, because here you are expecting me. When do you lose yourself in your work, losing track of time? What is that like? That's an important thing to pay attention to for so many of us that are seeking where God is calling. If you are losing track of time in the work you are doing now and it is life-giving and enriching to the world, then you are doing holy work. Maybe that's an assurance to some of you. And maybe it's good pondering when that's not happening with your daily work. And you're like, how do I get more of this? And this happens. And how do I, as your pastor, help you find spaces to live out that holy work? All right. And do that sacrifice. And when and how have you experienced the joy of sacrifice? I mean, when have you experienced? And think about that, write about that today. And here's a psalm to reassure that thought. Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and pay your vows to the Most High. Okay, and here's some journaling things you can do today. And I believe yesterday I put this into underneath the upload video, which is the one that will remain. This stream will disappear once I do my editing. So you can name some people you know who are Dimce. Describe them and their effect on you. And when do you experience the desire to give yourself more fully to God? And how do you respond? Now, today's reflection refers to posture as wordless prayer. Describe when wordless prayer happens for you. And that's a whole nother thing to consider. We don't often think about that. But sometimes to simply sit and then to place ourselves in that position of reception. Our body tells our mind, and it tells our heart and our spirit. Let's listen, let's receive. Okay, here's our prayer as we go on our way. And for some of you, it's the transition into journaling time. For me, I hope it's a transition into my journaling time and I don't get pulled away or interrupted. So we will. So think about those questions while you do dishes. Just don't let them go. All right. Draw me into the joy of surrender to your life-giving ways, that I may know and become the love you are. Amen. All right. It has been a pleasure to be with you today. Tell a friend.